I'm just going to be facilitating the discussion this afternoon. And we just got a few housekeeping things. So this session will be recorded and posted on the CVS Inverclyde YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be included in that recording, you could just pop your camera off for now. And also, if you could just keep yourself on mute just while everybody is chatting, that it just makes it easier. And I've got like 2 laptops going, so the feedback would just be wild. So it would be great to see who we have joining us this evening. So if you could use the chat function and just let us know where you're from, like what organisation you're from, what your name is, just a little bit about yourself, and we can just get a good idea of who's all here this evening. So please feel free to do that just now. And we do have a number of fantastic speakers this evening, including freelance practitioner Martin Danziger, Claire Dow, who is the Principal Events Officer for Dundee City Council, Kevin Edward Turner, who is the Co-Artistic Director at company Chameleon in Manchester, and we also have Elle Taylor, who is the Gridiron Theatre Production Manager. So we've got some amazing speakers this afternoon who are going to be chatting about making art outdoors, and we also have some fantastic folks here with us this afternoon. So Marie is from Northeast Arts Touring. Kevin is from Inverclyde Youth Theatre, Chaos and No Nonsense Production, and we've got Roz from Inverclyde, from CVS Inverclyde as well. So if you're all happy, just keep sharing your details in the chat, then that would be great. But how are we, Roz, for folks? Do you think we could get started?
I think we'll have a few more people coming through the waiting room, but great to get started, and we can just keep them. I'll keep letting them in as they come.
Perfect. So as I said, we've got a number of really fantastic speakers with us this afternoon, and first off we have freelance practitioner Martin, who is going to do our intro this afternoon. So I'll just pass you over to Martin just now. You're still on mute there, Martin, just in case.
Okay. Please tell me that I'm now sharing my screen. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hello, my name is Martin Danziger, and I'm a freelance director, producer, social circus practitioner, and clown. And I'm going to be doing a whistle-stop introduction to making work outdoors. Before I start, everything I say will be wrong under certain circumstances and different situations. So, yeah, all of these rules are rules to be broken, and they are broken wonderfully and brilliantly by everyone. Like lots of people, my first experience of doing outdoor theatre was a little bit accidental. We were on tour in France, the theatre got closed down. We thought, hey, we can just do the show on the streets instead. And there's nothing like watching a third of your audience get up and leave because what looked brilliant in a theatre looks rubbish outside, to make you realise that actually there's a real art to it. And I think one of the things that those of us who spend more time doing it is you realise that actually there are real differences between working indoors and outdoors, and respecting those differences are really important. So this is Sue from Welfare State, who used to be one of Britain's kind of great outdoor companies. So street theatre, what does it mean? It's lots of different things to lots of different people. I tried to start putting down all the different types of street theatre that I could think about, and these are some of them. So I'll just run through them very quickly so we all know what we're talking about. But walkabout, so characters, whether they're on stilts, whether they're eccentric characters on walkabout where they haven't got a performance space, but they are commissioned to engage with an audience in a town, village, festival, whatever. Walk by would be, I suppose the most obvious would be people like living statues, but also could be kind of musical buskers where you're not expected to stop and watch. So again, in current restrictions where we're not gathering a crowd, walk-bys are a possibility. Traffic light shows, you don't get them so much in this country, but in lots of countries where I suppose traffic lights are slower, that wonderful 2-minute juggling routine that you can pull out in front of the traffic lights and keeps lots of people alive in various parts of the country. Circle shows. This is probably the kind of most obvious one and the one that I'll talk about most, but yeah, the classic big circle of people watching somebody do something on the street or somewhere else. And again, circle shows can mean very different things to people who are used to performing in Covent Garden to people who are kind of creating shows for a park. Site specific, and Gridiron have got an awful lot of more knowledge about this than I have, but yeah, shows that are created specifically for one specific site. And there are lots of different ways of doing that. Happenings, immersive events, I'll sort of jumble together, but yeah, things that possibly defy descriptions and happen wherever you want them to. We can talk about them. Flash mobs, everybody will know. Promenade and parades, I will describe as together. So a parade is essentially where the performers walk past the audience, and a promenade is where the audience walks past the performers. Son et Lumière, I suppose traditionally these were really big, kind of almost sort of narrated history shows, and now they've become a much more diverse range. So something like Enchanted Forest could be described as Son et Lumière, could be described as promenade, but anything that is foregrounding light and music over performers. And finally, those kind of giant spectacles that some of us love to do, but yeah, so the opening of Olympics or Commonwealth Games or creating your own malarkey. So why is outdoor theatre so different to indoors? Because a theatre has got lots of magic that we simply take for granted. We take for granted that we go in and there's an obvious place where the performers go and there's a really obvious place where the audience go. We take for granted the fact that you can sit 100, 200, 2,000 people and they can all see because of raked stages or raked audience. We take for granted wings, backdrops, backstages, but actually without that, the neutrality of all of those and the ability to come on and off, you've got a whole bunch of questions that you suddenly need to answer. You've got the wonderful bit about power and lights and sound, not just being able to turn things on actually, but also being able to turn things off. So, you know, so a theatre, you can only hear the sound that's coming from the stage and you can hear it really clearly. But you can also turn off the lights in the auditorium in a way that is trickier to do outdoors. And all of this sort of leads to that magic of you can really quite easily get people to focus. One person standing on stage, lit, is really obviously the focal point of attention against a black backdrop. One person standing on the street against a crowd is really hard to tell that you're meant to be looking at them. Acoustics, again, in a theatre you can hear people talk nice and quietly. Outside, that's not always the case. And then there's all the kind of, all the sort of infrastructure bits about toilets and box office and, you know, sort of what happens if you need to evacuate the space. And again, other people will talk about this much more. But all of those bits, they don't exist outside when you start. So if you want them to exist, you have to really think hard about how you're going to make them exist.
Martin, we've just got about 1 minute and 42 left.
Fantastic. So things to consider before you start. Where are you going to do it? Where are people going to stand? Where are the audience going to be? Where's the backstage area? How many people can see? in your performance space. And how you're going to deal with that? Are you going to do it during the day so you don't need lights, or at night and you are, but it's more exciting? Licensing, let someone else talk about that. Audience, how they're going to get there, how they're going to know they're in the right place. How are you going to get money for it? Is it ticketed in advance? Is it walk up? Is it passing the hat? Where's the tech infrastructure? And at some really boring level, you do have to ask yourself, why are you doing it outside? And because of COVID, works up to a point, but you also kind of need to make that work in the work. So once you start talking about the work, and I think Kevin's going to talk about this more, but lots of things that you really need to think about. And I suppose the really big bit is choosing the context to match location. How do you make your show work in that space? Or how do you make that space work for a show? There's no point in doing an elegant two-hander, which is all about the nuances of text, if you're having to shout it above the noise of buses going past. So really think about all of those things and think about the context. You know, what are you going to do to get an audience to stop in the first place? And what are you going to do with them at the end of the show? So all those bits where in the theatre we know what happens, we're quite happy to sit around and have a drink in the foyer. How does that work outdoors? And it really is different. And great shows, in a way, plan their moments from the first appearance of a performing stage right through to closing the circle, making that audience right through to the very moment where people are leaving it in whatever way they are. I'll leave this on briefly just so that it can be recorded, but this is quite a useful set of books if anybody's into books, of people who have worked in theatre. So yeah, check them out. And I can send that to anyone who's after it. If you're after more advice, Articulation is Scotland's Circus Street Arts and Physical Performance umbrella organisation, and the website and Facebook page is a great way of getting in touch with people who might be able to offer more advice, and hopefully everyone else is going to stick to time. I thank you. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Martin. So our first question for you, Martin, is what's the most memorable outdoor production that you've watched and what made it so special?
So I suppose that's really hard to answer, because I suppose it's sort of, they're all special because of their different bits, but you know, seeing the first Royal Deluxe show that I saw in France, and you know, sort of the scale and the enormity and almost just the range of mechanisms that they had to make spectacle there. You know, so watching a piano being catapulted into the sky, watching them change the scene with an aeroplane engine pumping out smells so that you sort of change it by what smell you have. That was wonderful. Welfare State International, an astonishing company. Who was the Polish company who came over and did coming over at the festival in the 90s? Can't remember. Amazing. But yeah, I think it's so much about those situations. Yeah.
Thank you. So something I would quite like to ask is, how do you still capture that magic of, you know, when you go to a theatre and you sit down and the lights go down, and as you said, you've got that kind of like magic where it's almost like real in that very moment. And obviously when people are outside, you can kind of see them coming into this space because it's wide open. Like, how do you capture that same level of excitement and magic as if it's real and it's happening right in front of you?
I suppose at one level, it's much more real, because in a way, all the barriers that a theatre puts up aren't there. So at some level, it's really embracing that sense of, I am in this space with you, and that the sort of pleasure of that. And I think great street performers find a lovely way of making that connection. But I also think you kind of need to work on atmosphere, and I think some of the shows that you see that do that really well, they will have a kind of 5-10 minute kind of 30-minute preamble, which is not really to watch, but it kind of gives you a flavor, and you know, that can be very, very serious and very dramatic. And you see shows where almost you don't see their faces until the last minute, and then when they're ready to start, they turn around to face you. It can be much, you know, so if it's a sillier show, it can be kind of playful silliness before, just to sort of get the audience going. That can also really help actually with closing the circle of putting people where you want, and, you know, sort of the silly games of getting people to sit in the right place make such a difference when you actually start performing. If you have got that circle closed and you know you've got that sort of that proper feeling of an audience around you. So yeah, and it's horses for courses, and it's all about thinking about what your show is and where you're performing it and how you're going to relate to that audience. Because also at some level it depends, are you inviting the audience to come to a strange forest that they've never been to, or are you actually invading their space? Are you as a performer going into their town square that they're used to behaving in a certain way, and you're saying for the next hour we're going to try and change the rules? So yeah, horses for courses.
Perfect, thank you so much, Martin. So we will move on at the moment, and we're going to start looking at the programming perspective of our outdoors, and Claire is going to actually present on that just now. So I'll just pass you over to Claire there, and I just want to say just before I do that, that if you do have any questions for any of our speakers, even including Martin, we will still have time towards the end to answer any questions, but please feel free as we go just to pop your questions in the chat, because we'll have some time after each speaker as well, just to go through some questions for that specific person. But anyway, I will pass you over to Claire.
Thanks very much, Laurie. I'm just going to share my screen. One moment, play from the start. Excellent. I'm hoping you can see that and you can hear me. So hello everybody. Thank you very much, Martin. That was great. It's just good to hear how you make work outdoors. From my perspective, I'm going to talk about and it's entirely from my own perspective, what I tend to look for when I'm programming work outdoors. So hello, this is my team and I'm Claire Dow, and I run the events team in Dundee City Council, and we're a wee team of 3, that's Rebecca and Johanna, and our role is really to increase the scale and scope of activity in Dundee across events. So we do that in 2 different ways. We look after folk who want to use any of the parks and public spaces in Dundee. So if you want to do stuff, come and talk to us and we'll help facilitate all of that. And we also deliver our own events. So we will do fireworks night, we'll do Summer Streets Festival, and we're now going to be doing a programme over the winter as well, which is very exciting. I'll get back to that in a while. And I also chair the Safety Advisory Group. So when you do work outdoors and you need to get a public entertainment licence, you will quite often, depending on the scale of your work, have to go through a committee made up of Police Scotland and your local NHS board and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and all sorts of interested folk, to look at ensuring that your plans are safe, basically. They're not very interested in what you're doing. They just want to know you've thought about public safety. So we help support that work, and that supports our licensing colleagues to grant the public entertainment license, which I'm sure that Elle will come to also. So yeah, that's us and generally the work we do. It's important to understand that my team sit in economic development. We sit in city development in the council, and a lot of the reason that we do activity at all is for economic benefit. So we want folk to come to Dundee. We're making Dundee an interesting place to live, to work, to study, and to invest in. So the council sees events in an instrumental way. We're not doing this because we've seen your work and we loved it and we want to bring it to Dundee. We're doing it because we want visitors to come. And that means that some of the work that we do looks at the gaps in our calendar. So as I mentioned, we do the Summer Streets Festival because there wasn't really anything on in the summer. And we're also looking at our winter programme. So we look at that seasonality. We also look at kind of social impact. And, you know, for me, the social impact is really important. And I love this picture of these kids being proud to be from Dundee, and that kind of idea that we're building civic pride. Folk come together for events. It's that shared experience. It's that kind of, you turn to the person beside you at a gig and you're going through something together, is what is really, really important. And what I love about events is that gathering people together to do things. And that shared experience does build community and does build that social impact. And then we like to think we have a bit of cultural impact, and that our festivals and our events are about celebrating the culture here in Dundee, about learning from each other, about celebrating our digital heritage, our Eid. Our university has an amazing Festival of the Future where they do a lot of work about their research. And it's those events that are particular to a place which tend to be very strong and very interesting. So what we look for, so get to the point, what we look for is, I'll be honest, I will say it again, I work for a council and we are low risk. We want work that has been seen before. We really want to know what it is. Lots of other festivals have other budgets and programming opportunities in terms of commissioning, but really we like to know what we're getting. We like to see videos of your work. We like to see photos of folk having an amazing time, something with broad appeal that's suitable for families. I mean, nothing difficult, lots of fun. And we love anything participatory. We love folk joining in. But essentially, pictures of people having an amazing time is what we like to see when folk are approaching us with their projects. This is one of my favourite photos ever. This is from our Streets Festival, and this was the Egg people who came and did Waggle Dance. It was a gang of folk dressed as bees with kazoos, and they just caused mayhem. The amount of nonsense they got away with in terms of the public was just a joy, a total joy to watch. So yeah, Martin talked about spectacle. And I think for us as well, there's an element, we want a bit of spectacle. We want folk to know something's going on. So that previous slide, I'll maybe go back to it, of All or Nothing. Actually, I can't see because of where you guys all are, but there's a big truss and there's flags and there's stuff. Like there's infrastructure. So even when they weren't performing and even when they weren't there and there wasn't any music playing, folks still got a sense that something was going on. And I think, and you know, that was brilliant for us. The other amazing thing about All or Nothing is, again, we're a small team of 3. We were trying to run a whole festival across multiple streets. They were amazing. They turned up, they set it all up themselves, they did their shows, they took it all down themselves. They weren't looking for crew, they weren't looking for stuff. They were, you know, they really, really were incredibly light on their feet. And again, when you're talking to people and you're talking to programmers, that clarity about your tech spec and what you need and what you don't need is really, really, really helpful to just be really clear with that up front, because they were awesome. They needed a couple of stewards and that was it. They were just, I love them. So yes, lots of fun. And here we go. Nonverbal. Again, you know, I'm covering a lot of what Martin said. We find that activity that doesn't have a lot of chat, that maybe has music. Music's great for drawing people in, or noises, but our events are in a city centre. You're not holding anybody for any length of time. You're not going to get any dialogue. You're definitely not going to get much in the way of narrative. What you're getting is an audience that are quite ambulatory. They won't turn up at 2 o'clock to see your show. They'll turn up at some point, and if your show's on, they'll wander up and they'll watch a bit. And as Martin said, they'll also wander away because they've got things to be doing. So it's quite important that you know, you might set performance times, but our audiences have zero respect for that, I would say. And also they have loads of chat. You'll get heckled. You will get chat back. So we've worked quite a lot with Alan and Serge in terms of their emerging street art performers. They come to Dundee and they try things out. And it's a great learning curve to see some of those interactions. It's all walkabout and it's quite one-on-one, but it's quite good fun. So here is sort of snapshot of our street festival. I'm going to keep an eye on my time. How am I doing? Oh, I've got 2 minutes to tell you about the wheelie bins, because the wheelie bins are awesome. My photos never do these things justice because it just looks like a pile of kids in a bin, but they had 2 remote control wheelie bins and a stack of traffic cones that drove around the place, like unseen, you couldn't tell what was happening, and squirted water at people. Oh my God, the chaos. It was just hysterical. But this is our sort of snapshot of our Streets Festival. We're pretty low budget, I would say, compared to Lorenzo and the Merchant City Festival. You know, we've only got about 20 grand to get entertainment. So we spend all our money on boring things like fencing and logistics and stewards and toilets. So we look to work in partnership with people. We are in talks with Doing the Rabbit Hole and again Merchant City Festival about how our dates might add up and might cause, you know, there might be some sort of logical touring progression. So we're doing what we can to kind of support performers who have work, you know, to get a volume of work out of us, so that you can travel on a little bit of a circuit. So we're looking at things like that to try and help. Very quickly, this time last year, my team and I were working towards the big weekend with the BBC in Dundee. And then gatherings are not allowed. There's been a massive impact of COVID, huge suspension of any sort of gatherings, any sort of fun, fireworks cancelled, Christmas was cancelled. And our elected members have a massive aversion to anything that might look like the council, might possibly look like they might gather anybody ever again. So we did this kind of installation work. We commissioned 6 artists to fill our empty shop windows. You can see the window kind of before and after, which was lovely. It was great to be, you know, animating our city centre and making it gorgeous. And we did the same then again at Christmas with some Christmas tree themed stuff. But we're finding that installations, durational work, things that people can visit in their own time are massively increasing in appeal. And going forward, thanks to the situation we're in, we do have an awful lot of empty spaces, and we're certainly finding our budgets are tighter because we can't go to local businesses for sponsorship anymore. Those asks are really difficult. So going forward, we're looking at activity where we can manage, there's sort of 3 main things that we need to manage. That is capacity. We need to manage, oh, I've lost my notes now. Where's my 3 main things? Controlling the access to our events so we can manage capacities. Hygiene, so definitely lots of squirt and sanitization, and track and trace. All completely possible to do on the streets. Lots of clickers, lots of counting, but does need an extra little bit of thinking about who's managing your crowds. How are you organizing them? Where are they going to be? Are you in those public spaces, or are you trying to fence off areas? All of those are future considerations. But thanks to, there's a lovely bit of silver lining, because thanks to the lack of these gatherings, so we're not doing fireworks, we're also not doing our massive Christmas light switch on. We would cram 20,000 people into our city centre for 10 minutes of, you have to be there at 7 o'clock on Friday for the light switch on. We've now taken that whole budget, and we're instead going to do a much more durational program over the whole of December. Last year we started with this beautiful, this is the Dundee Christmas card. And you could visit the Christmas card and you could walk in amongst it, get your photo, and it was lovely and it was very COVID safe and everybody was delighted. But it means that this year, of course, we'll do something similar, but we'll hopefully be adding sort of a program of random pop-up performance and other activity over the sort of month of December. So we will have, you know, there's an opportunity in the fact that we can't gather 20,000 people at once, because we can do smaller, more durational, more surprising things, which hopefully will be lots and lots of fun. But from your point of view, in terms of how we program, there's nothing different in terms of performance style or activity. Go and check out Articulation. They've got lots of good work. Outdoor Arts UK also have lots of good work of networks of people, of what they're up to, and videos and things like that. I think Martin said it already, outdoors not for everybody. You've got to be a little bit robust, and you've got to be able to cope with the wind and the rain potentially, and your audience not being all that fussed. But yeah, I think that's all covered. But yeah, we will hopefully be doing more fun things in future with maybe slightly smaller crowds is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was amazing. I love to see everything that's going on in Dundee, because it's had such a big shift recently and culture and arts and stuff. Like, I'm from Fife, so Dundee's like just up the road, and been able to see it change from being younger, because all I knew of Dundee when I was younger was Sensations. Like but now it's just this fantastic cultural city, which it's always been, but now it's definitely been more recognised. So we've got a little starter question here. So if someone doesn't have, or an organisation or a freelancer doesn't have photos or reviews yet of their shows because they're quite new to it, how would you suggest that they bring something together for you guys?
Oh, that's a difficult question, because, and I'm going to sound really harsh here, get your phone out and take some photos, or video a bit of, you know, get your pal to video a little bit. I listen to other folk. I will listen to recommendations from people who have seen work. So if it's been seen, but if it's brand new and nobody's seen it, then, you know, put your phone on a little stand and try and capture some of it. There would have to, you know, we will, like I said in the presentation, we work with Alan and Serge, and there are, you know, there are opportunities to develop your work and to get some feedback and some training. So, you know, I think, again, as I said, we're pretty risk averse. So we probably, if I'm truthful, we probably wouldn't book you until somebody we knew had seen it, or we'd seen it ourselves, which is horrible, but I'm sorry, that's it.
No, that's perfect, because everybody's got to start somewhere, don't they? So they'll probably then eventually work up to working with you guys once they've got all their stuff in place. Perfect. So another question is, are there any resources that you would recommend to help creators think in a COVID safe way?
Yes. Oh God. I mean, if you really want to learn all about the COVID stuff, I can tell you I am drowning in guidance coming from the government. It is ongoing and ridiculous. I think I would send you to our website. If you go to Dundee City Council's website and you type in planning an event, you'll get our version of the government guidelines. You're very welcome to go to the government scot.gov website and Google COVID events, but oh my actual, it's pretty, it doesn't make any sense. Whereas our lovely officer Rebecca has taken all of that and made it much more practical. It's not that different, and we will get to a point where COVID is just something else that's on your risk assessment. It'll be just like bad weather, or, you know, emergency situations, or counterterrorism. You'll have a bit about infection control. It's you know, what I didn't refer to very well in the presentation. It's secure your area so you can count how many people are there. It's have plenty of squirt at touch points. Elle smiling because I'm stealing your thunder here. And the track and trace. You are obliged as an event organizer to have track or trace. So as a performer, you know, don't blow bubbles at people. Don't hand them things. You know, if you're juggling and they have to throw a ball back to you, that's probably a bad idea. When you are raising your voice, you would definitely want to keep away from people. So yeah, in terms of COVID stuff for performers, yeah, blowing bubbles, being too close to people when you're speaking loudly. The restrictions on singing are lifting, but I'd have to check, because actually I'm not 100% sure about singing and musical instruments at the moment. I'm sure it will be fine soon. Help, if anybody knows the answer to that, help. But I would certainly say, you know, keep your distance from folk.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Claire.
Answer that.
Oh, is Martin going to answer that?
I think so.
Oh, you're on mute just now, Martin, just in case.
Yeah, I wasn't really going to add, but I was going to add a massive caveat that it's really easy to find rules online that are now out of date. And everything is changing so much, both kind of the actual situation, but also our understanding of the science of transmission, that if you accidentally find a document from 6 months ago, you will do all sorts of things that are absolutely not right to do now, and vice versa. So I think that bit of going to people like Claire and saying, what are the guidelines that you are imposing for this festival, and how are you running this? And then you can fit to that. But trying, otherwise I think you might just end up in a rabbit hole. Yeah,
and I think mostly you will be hosted by a festival or by somebody, and they're the official event organizer. They got to sort it out. I mean, they will obviously talk to you about it, but I would just push that way a little bit to people like me who, has to write up all that stuff.
Kevin?
Just to add on to that, you probably as an organisation will have to have your own COVID policy in place anyway, even though you are being hosted by a festival, just because that festival, I'm having conversations with people and they're really like, what is your COVID policy? So
also you've got all of the rehearsals and the creating, like all of that before you ever get near performing.
Thank you so much for all of your input on those questions there. So as I said, just keep popping your questions in the chat. We will have more time at the end as well to chat for any questions, just generally for everyone or whoever feels like they can pop in for questions. But please just keep popping them in the chat for after every speaker. Up next, we are moving on to Kevin, who is going to be telling us, speaking to us, from the artistic perspective. So I'll just pass you over to Kevin.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laurie. Hello, everyone. My name's Kevin Edward Turner from company Chameleon. We have a few different things that we do. I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction to who I am. So I'm one of the co-founders and co-artistic directors of company Chameleon. Been operating around since 2007. Before that, I worked as a performer for many different companies, both here and abroad. And then in 2007, it was kind of my dream of an old friend of mine to set up a company in Manchester. And that's what we've done. And we tour nationally and internationally, work for the theatre. We also make work for outdoor public spaces, which is why I've been invited to speak today. And we also have a huge learning and participation program. And then the last aspect of what we do is actually about professional development and offering opportunities for other artists in the greater Manchester region. So there's quite a few different things that I do there. But today we're talking about outdoor art, and I'm going to give you the artist perspective as a choreographer and a maker, but also putting on some different hats on as well. Because I think that you have to wear multiple hats in order to get what you want to do forward. We move it forward. So the first place I'd like to talk about in terms of making work for outdoors is the same as any kind of creation period. It's research and development and the importance of investing in the creative exploration of the work. This obviously gives you, as we all know, it gives you depth and richness and clarity in the work and the ideas that you communicate, which you're not going to get if you don't give yourself some dedicated time for your research. Also, what's great about R&D periods of time is that you can have a sharing within that period, and then you can start to invite key partners or key stakeholders, program directors, or you can come and watch your development and see the seeds of your idea beginning to develop from the beginning. And that's how you can begin to develop momentum and also begin to develop support for the next stage of your project. So if you're already getting some research and development, you're inviting all these people get to see it, then the natural progression for that is to start to have conversations about commissioning. If you just go away and make something in a corner and don't invite anybody or don't share anybody, then nobody's going to know about it. You're not going to get any feedback whether your ideas are even reading or not. And you're not going to be making those really important connections that you need to be making in the marketplace in order to get your work out into market. I know that sounds quite businessman-y, and I am an artist, but you have to be both to a certain extent. And I think you have to be quite savvy in terms of how you're thinking about the development of your project. It is our R&D, so it's really important that the focus is on experimentation and innovation. People are not expecting it to be finished at all. So really just go for it. And, experiment as much as possible, try as many different ideas out as possible. And I know this sounds like a bit of an odd thing to say, but I know people who have done it, who have made work for outdoors, indoors, and never taken it outdoors at any point within the process. So I know that might sound like quite an obvious thing to say, but you'd be surprised, yeah? So, you know, you have to really make sure that within that initial period of time that you are trying your ideas out in where you think you're going to be doing it and the kind of situations and environments that you're going to be coming across. Use that period of time in order to set yourself up for the future to where you need to be. Another little thing, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in a little bit more depth, but you need to know the marketplace in which you're operating as well. So don't go out there blind. Go and watch festivals. Go and watch work. See how festivals are curating it. Is it through a theme? Is it through a certain time frame, or is it from a certain country? You know, festivals are curated in lots of different ways. Go out there, see where your work fits. Yeah. Also, during the R&D phase, if you should really be having all your collaborations and production team put together. That can sometimes just be one person, and that's cool. Doesn't matter how many people they are, but by the end of that, you need to make sure that you have your creative team for the next stage, which is obviously commissioning. Now, commissioning, obviously, hopefully you would have built up, maybe got some public funding from Creative Scotland, or maybe you've been given a grant or a bursary. This next stage is going into commissioning. So that's that. And, you know, I'm not going to talk a massive deal about that, because that's about basically lots of different things. It's about the quality of the work. The quality of the work is paramount. But also it's important to remember that when anybody gives you public money, it's an investment. So they need to know that you're able to manage that investment. I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail as we move forward as well. But before we even go into all that anyway, you got to think about your context of your performance. Like, so where are you going to place your work? I know that Martin talked about this, and this is so important from a practical, but also from an artistic perspective as well. Does it need to be a church? Do you need to be outside of a church? Do you need to be underneath a motorway bridge? Do you need to be in a shopping centre? Does it have to be a piazza? Does it have to be a certain way or look a certain way? These are really, really, really important questions. So where is it going to be? When do you place it? Is it at nighttime? Is it in the middle of the night? Is it sunset? Is it sunrise? Does all these things, are they important to the thematic conceptual development of your work? If they are, why are they? Yeah, and if you're gonna, you need to make sure that you give that information to the festival as well. So there's all these things that need to be thought about. How do you wish to present your work to the audience? Martin talked about this before. Is it in the round, which is the circle performance? You know, is it down the side street? Can you have 400 people watching, or are you taking one person at a time into a little side street and doing something with one person? Does it need to be outside a church or a civic library so that you're able to somehow recreate the thread as you go from one city to the next? Or is it a sighted work that can only be done within that city? You know, so there's all these different questions that you've got to be asking yourself. You know, where's the audience? Do you manage the audience? Do you not manage the audience? Do you go, like Martin talked about, is it a promenade performance? Do you have people following you, or are you following them? Do you need a stage? Do you need to have special equipment? Do you need to have eyepieces, binoculars, headphones? You know, all these things about how are you going to be communicating and interacting with the space, the audience. And so for me, it's dead simple. I try to keep things simple because it gets complicated quick. Where, when, and how. Yeah. Another thing to think about in terms of making work for outdoors as well, I mean, this again, it's only my opinion. So is, you know, you need to be able to serve the requirements of the festival. So, you know, Claire touched upon this before. The simpler you are and the more self-contained you can be, the more the festival is going to be able to love you. Okay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have a complex show. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the more self-contained you can be, you turn up to the site, you can take care of it, you're very clear in your tech spec in terms of all your requirements and what is needed, then the organizers have a million other things to sort out, and you're going to have a massive tick. Yeah. And as always, if you're pleasant, easy to work with, organized, and of high quality work, you're onto a winner. Yeah. Because like Claire will tell you, she'll talk to all the friends and they'll go, oh, we want to book that work as well. They're really nice to work with, and it was brilliant work. Things you need to think about.
2 minutes, sorry.
Got 2 minutes. Oh man, this is all right. Okay. So again, I'm going to talk about producer versus artist. So you need to explore the balance between vision and creativity and practical reality. You might want to have burning cars dropping down from a crane, a 7 huge piece punk band. You might want the LSD screens everywhere and the people to have headphones on. So it's a mad, crazy, interactive environment. But what I'll say to you is that's amazing. And I always encourage blue sky thinking. But let's just have a look at that. Do you know how to source a crane? Do you know how to source a crane driver? What's the licensing around that? How do you drop a fire in the street with fire with people around? There's so many things that you need to think about. So what I'm trying to say to you is there's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but you have to cut your cloth accordingly to your practical experience, because nobody is going to give you the money that you're required to make a show like that unless you can show a portfolio of work and a portfolio of experience to get to that scale. Another thing to really think about as well is, there's so much to say. Let's talk about audience engagement. Do you do it or do you not do it? That's up to you. I've seen it done amazingly. I've seen it done really badly. The times when I've seen it done really well is when it's been intrinsic to the piece and intrinsic to the piece's development. It can't be done as something that's just slapped over the cross. And I just want to finish on this last thing, which is understanding the marketplace. Where does your work fit? What niche or gap have you got? What's your USP? What makes you different? And what are you bringing to that festival that's different from everybody else? And I just want to finish. The reason why I might make work outdoors is I come from a very working class background. I don't come from a family of artists or anything like that. And for me, making work for outdoor context is so unbelievably democratic. People get to be able to engage in your work that might not necessarily go into a theatre. I make dance theatre and contemporary dance, I guess, essentially with other influences. I mean, a certain type of person goes and sees that from the theatre. So for me to go out into the streets and show something to different people who may not come into contact with it is something that I really highly value. And also as well, some festivals are looking for fun. Some festivals are looking for provocative. I made a work that was an outdoor piece of dance that was about mental health and how it impacted me and my family and the rest of it, okay? It was a hard-hitting work, didn't hold back, and it's been booked all over the place. So it depends on the festival. And that's why I'm talking about know your marketplace. How do they create? Where do you see yourself? Yeah. Now, I've got a million other things that I want to say, but I think that's
Have another wee minute if that's
I can have another minute?
Yeah.
Okay, I skipped over loads of different things. Last thing, there's loads more, but distractions. How are you going to deal with them? Yeah. There's planes, people smoking fags and probably stronger stuff as well. And the rest of it, it's all going on around you. Yeah. So what do you do as an artist? How do you deal with that? Is that something that you just don't deal with and you use your presence in order to pull the performances into your experience? Or is it something that you use it as part of your text or part of what's happening, and you allow the flexibility for your performers to be able to incorporate any kind of distractions into the flow of the work? So there's 1,000,001 questions, like Martin said, that you need to answer. Not all of them need to be complex, but the most important thing, as always, is it's got to be high quality, be pleasant, make sure that people see it in its development and its process, know your place within the marketplace, and know why and you're doing what you're doing. Hopefully that was useful. It spoke really quickly.
Thank you so much. It literally just buzzed there just as you finished, so thank you so much for that, Kevin. Just a question from me. What has been your most, like, obviously you spoke about the piece that you did around mental health and things like that, but what has been one of the most well-received, most successful outdoor pieces of performances that has been something that's actually been relatively, simplistic, like something that's not got cranes and cars and all sorts, but something that's really quite
simple? The work I make is not complex by any stretch of the imagination. It's bodies and space. We work within the round, and we rely on the quality of the choreography and the basically the talent of the performers really to carry it through. That's a conscious choice to do that. I have seen other works with props and stuff, and for me, ultimately, it's about this. We did a show in Brighton International Festival down south, and we did the show. After the show, I've witnessed this, and it's broadly about mental health issues, but more specifically about crisis I had in my life when I became manic for the first time, got diagnosed with bipolar, and then went psychotic, had to spend time in hospital. It's about that, but more importantly, it's about the story of all the people around me who got impacted. We did that show in Brighton, and an elderly gentleman came up to me with his son who was about my age, and he said to me, you know, that performance, it reminded me of the time after my wife died, and he started telling me about this and telling me about that. And his son was stood next to him with his mouth completely aghast. And he said to him, Dad, you've never said any of that stuff before. And then off they went, having a conversation about something that's really important. So for me as an artist, I felt really satisfied because I'd provoked a conversation, I provoked a response, and now they were having a conversation about something that they probably should have had years ago. But that's what a silly bloke can be like sometimes. So I think that, you know, art is a real way of, you know, affecting people. And that's what's hopefully, for me, that's what it's about, is moving people. Whether that's moving people to a tear or moving people to a smile, it's about moving you in some way or another.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I was just thinking as well, when you're saying that outdoor theatre is so much more democratic and accessible for people, and maybe from the perspective of if you maybe reach someone in that setting who wants to take part in theatre, who wants to take part in being an artist themselves, but maybe doesn't necessarily have the same opportunity or the means that other people do. And do you think that by, you know, not using props and not using materials, that does maybe, you know, and ignite something in someone being like, well, they don't have anything physical but themselves in that space, and I could do that as well?
But potentially, yeah, potentially. I mean, the way that we pitch our work is that the artists come in and transform the space. And that space that is empty then becomes pregnant with meaning by the very fact that they enter the space. The thing is, we're really lucky in a lot of the festivals that we go to, there's already an audience there for us. And if there isn't an audience, we make sure that we pull one. And, you know, I love it. I remember we were up at Stockton International Riverside Festival. I was doing another piece, Push a Duet. And there was about 5 guys who were working on the scaffolding fight, and they went to Greg's to get sausage rolls and then stopped. And then they didn't even eat the sausage rolls and watched the whole piece. So for me, that's like, you know, that's the kind of person that I want to see dance, who's like, actually, you know, one of them came up to me afterwards and was like, yeah, you know, it made me think about this and it made me think about that. And that's what it's all about. That guy's never been to a fair. I put money on it, you know, and that's what I love about outdoor art. It's, you know, and not all work I make is super heavy either. Do you know what I mean? It's across the board. But also as well, like, one thing I didn't talk about in my presentation is about legacy. So we do have QR codes on our, so people can find out about any issues relating to the piece, or if they've been impacted, or if they just want to find more information about the company. We also often hand out postcards as well with images on, which are a nice token that people keep and do put on the fridges, because we've seen pictures of them sent to the company. So there's like nice tokens where people can have a legacy. And I'm sure that if they find out a little bit about the company, and if they are interested in doing it themselves, that they could hopefully then find avenues wherever they are in their own locality.
Perfect, thank you. That's such a helpful resource to have, especially when sometimes you see something outside, like say it was at the Fringe or something, and you're like, who was that? What was that person? So having that kind of tangible stuff there is amazing. Martin, did you have your hand up? You're on mute just now, just in case.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it is incredibly democratic. It's wonderful, you know. So that sense of the people who will turn out for the street parade going past them, who would never dream of going to the theatre. But again, because of that, we have to remember that you then get an audience that possibly has never been an audience before, and you can see lots of works of outdoor works which forget that and kind of think that everyone's going to behave like nice, well-trained, civilized audience members and kind of shut up and applaud and sit down and everything else. And they don't, because, and kind of why should they? And, you know, and I've been involved in shows where, you know, children have rushed on stage to protect the person who's getting attacked by the monsters. I've kind of watched a drunk man in Edinburgh kind of brilliantly stop the mystery plays when, what's the name, Jacob was trying to sacrifice his son, and in ran one of the local kind of ne'er-do-wells to save the day. And yeah, like Kevin says, how you deal with that is sort of up to you and up to the strength of the performance and the freedom that you've got within that scene. But it's really worth remembering that when you do stuff outside, they're not going to behave like they do inside. They're going to behave like, you know, so if you get a handful of gold and throw it on stage, everybody's going to go, oh, somebody's throwing gold on the stage, and they'll all sit there. You get a handful of gold coins and throw them in the street, you've got an absolute bun fight. Now, if you're ready for that and that's what you want, that's brilliant. If you're not, it will take you 5 minutes to get the audience to sit down and carry on. So yeah, it's just really kind of enjoying that pleasure of people who don't know yet how to be an audience.
And preparing for every outcome. We had one show where there was a bit of a conflict between two guys, and this woman went, "What are you doing? There's kids!" And then ran into the middle of into the dance space and grabbed one of the dancers, like, "What are you doing?" And he just put her arm around him, Lee. And he was like, "Look, it's fine." And he took her to the side and he had a little chat with her. And then she realized what was going on. And then everyone was looking at her. But the tension that was created by that event was amazing, man. Oh, so you have to be prepared. Totally, Martin. Like you say, they're not going to act in the way that you think that they may in a theatre if you're used to making work for a theatre. And I'd also say, if you're thinking about making dance as well, the time is different. You can play with time and the tension of time so much more in a theatre. Outdoors, my experience is if you don't get them, they're just gonna go somewhere else.
Thank you so much, everyone there. That was great. It's so interesting to think of all the different eventualities and things that you might come up against in outdoor theatre. That me, not as a theatre person, would just absolutely die on the spot having to deal with. So it's such a great way it's such a great thing to hear the fun ways that you can just, you know, feed that into your performance as well. So thank you so much there. Up next we have Elle, who is going to be talking about the production management perspective of things. So I'll just pass you over to Elle just now.
Hi, I'm Elle. I'm a freelance production manager based in Glasgow, Scotland. I also a lighting designer as well. I've done some outdoor events and with that hat on as well, talking about multiple hats. So I'm going to jump straight on in there. I'm sure there's a couple of points that have already been covered, so I'll try to skip over those and stick to the ones that maybe haven't been touched on as much. So yeah. So locations, I've just spoken about this, but it's really important, you know, where is it going to be performed, down to the really practical parts. What kind of ground is it? Is it even? Is it going to be uneven? Is it going to be soggy? Is it going to be dry? Are we going to have lots of leaves around and make it slippy? Do we have a clear area? All those fun sort of thoughts and ideas to keep us going. And if you are going to different places, do you need to have a bare minimum space? So actually something I'm encountering now, I'm working as production manager for All or Nothing, and we've got a new show coming out, which is a giant swing set, which is very exciting, but proving a couple of challenges because we really need a bare minimum clear space, which is the space is there, but maybe a few things in the way. So yeah, and also having an idea of, we keep talking about the public and, you know, that sort of handling of that. So having a think of that, and if it's okay that you're okay with public walking past on their normal walk, or is it not okay, and to just have a think about that. And just to echo that as well, is it the audience experience something you can brief your wonderful festival or venue about, or is it something you want to manage yourself? A couple of shows I've done that we've had audience on a bus, and so we've wanted to take that's a lot more show specific and to sort of maintain that going for Grid-Eyed, actually, from going on the bus straight through to location. So just something to think about. It might be that you don't need, that you're happy to just gather an audience. The key, if is anything I could take away from a production manager's perspective today, is if you can be as self-sufficient as possible,
everyone's going to be happy, both yourself and the venue, and it means that you don't have to rely on what's there. You can turn up, you know you're happy, and you know you're safe if you've got everything with you, which is, yeah, I appreciate that that's not always the case, but if you can at least, that's your aim, it's always a good place to start. And with the above point in mind, your team, so sort of keeping in mind of your worst case scenarios. If you're in the middle of nowhere and no one to help you, can you put your production on safely, and what team do you need to do this? And what time of day is your production? So we have touched on this already, but some, very simple, but daylight. If we're putting on the practical hat, if it's something you've done in the summer at, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and suddenly you're bringing it back out for maybe, dare I say it, a February time, you're talking about a completely different sunlight, and that brings in a whole lot of other practicalities to do with your just lighting and your audience safety and your own safety as well. So that just technical requirements, so lighting, sound, all great things, and rigging and set, so all great, but this does have a knock-on effect as well. So your lighting and sound, you're going to have to think about power and all of that, and also your rigging and set. So again, talking about ground, and if you're not going to be, you're going to be in different places, and you just want to make sure that that's done safely and that you have even ground, and what the effects of weather are. And rain is that's what I work back from when I'm ever looking after technical equipment for outdoor stuff, and IP rated, so IP being your weatherproof, as waterproof. But it's not to say that if your stuff isn't weatherproof that you can't make it weatherproof. It's just something you need to factor in about how you can make this equipment, because a lot of our stuff, especially with especially R&D, we create it, don't we? So it doesn't come off the shelf. So there are ways and means, but it's definitely something to consider. And as we were speaking about earlier, is actually going outside and putting your hat towards that. I've got just an example. This has been a saving grace for quite a lot of gridiron shows, and my walking trails and things, the garden sheds, and it's wet. I say not waterproof, wetproof. So you're talking about that condensation overnight, and dampness, and also having somewhere to lock away your valuables, just to have somewhere as a barrier. It's just so helpful, and also floor protection as well. Just that I think most people sometimes forget about that ground and sogginess and wetness and all of that, and evenness as well. I've said about power, and also just to have a think, put the hat on about access. If you're going to need to get up high, what kind of height are you talking about, and what kind of ground are you putting this on, and in what type of weather as well. So, and the last one, which I come across a lot, is your sound levels. It's great to have some sound, but sometimes sound travels in very funny ways outside, and so it might seem very loud to you, but other people on another side of a park might be hearing you. And also to have a think about you might have to bring it down for wildlife. Recently at Botanics, it wasn't sound levels, but it was lighting. I had to move about 4 meters away because I hadn't realized there was a badger set there. So just thinking about that, those sort of, we're not into traditional spaces that are to put performances on. So it's that sort of thing. Just, all sorts of things come out when you're outdoors, which is what's so great about it. The weather. So weather, I always advise to work from worst case scenario, which is, wet weather. As we're saying earlier, it's not for everyone, but you're talking your wind and wet weather, and sort of just being ready for those sorts of things. It might be that you've got a set, and a classic one is a gazebo, putting it up, and just thinking about when that wind comes in and it being anchored and all those sorts of things. And if you are getting it's not for you to take on, sometimes you can ask your set builder and they'll help you. There are people around you to help about this, but it's just to put it in your head and have that in your head and think about it at the earlier stages before you turn up to the festival. Lightning and all of that. So if got a metal structure or something about earthing it. But again, this is all just to get you thinking, not anything else. And the best thing as well is layers are your friends outdoors. So for the constant changing with weather, so you'll go from, especially in lovely Scotland, when we have rain in the morning and then we're bright and sunny by lunchtime. So yeah, and then security and facilities. So your self-sufficient idea, factor in where your team, where you're going to put your personal belongings. It might be that you just turn up in a van and that's fine. You can just put your personal belongings in there. But I think with all, especially on the first day, with all the other factors coming on and turning up, it's really nice to know, to have thought about that and not have to worry about that as an additional worry on the day. And the facilities as well, you know, your team or you are certainly going to be interested in about where the facilities are and where you can get a nice cup of coffee or some hot food, especially if it's a colder day, just to think about that. And as I said about there, it's not just about the thieves, it's also about the wildlife. So I can tell you one time turning up on the next day and the badgers have eaten some neon lighting because of the chemical inside kept them warm, you know, that. So it's that type of chewing cables, and, you know, it's keeping it, not to, you know, they're our friends, but also to factor in that sort of, it's not just people, it's wildlife around you, and that as well. I'm talking more about maybe the more site-specific pieces and parks. I just quickly, aware of time, I thought I'd just give you a quick toolkit of when you're turning out.
We're just at 1 minute, Elle, sorry.
Okay, great, that's fine. Just a quick, you know, if you got this, you'll be sorted. So just your basic plans, knowing it's what your bare minimum of you need to put on your show. Tape measure, it's always helpful. Camera, you know, you can write everything down, but a picture's worth 1,000 words. Your exploring boots, once you've done a site visit, have a look around, get a feel for you and the rest of your company. And also just taking notes, because I don't know about anyone else, but as much as I believe I'll remember it, I always forget something. So just taking notes on the day. And paperwork, just as for anyone watching the recording back, I've just written down some very basic paperwork you want to cover, your manual handling, slips, trips and falls, falling objects, adverse weather, working in public, etc., etc. I do have a risk assessment available as an example. If anyone wants that, please give me an email, and method statements as well as your risk assessment should be included. Here's some useful, I've purposely not spoken about COVID because I felt like if I just spoke about COVID, I would have just taken up the whole rest of the 9 minutes. So I've got the COVID guidance, as it was said earlier. It's a bit of a minefield, but I've put the performing arts and the events, the local authorities, and the Visit Scotland advice as well for putting on events. I've also put in my favourite weather app that this is also a controversy, but I trust the Norwegian weather app as being the one that saves me the most. And your health and safety website's there. And thank you. That's my email if anyone wants to, if I can be of any more help, please do get in touch. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elle. That was brilliant. It's so great to see such like a quick stop tour of the production side of everything, because that can be so tricky. I remember working on a festival and as a production assistant on the islands in Scotland, and it was just not the place that you should have a festival, but a festival was happening, and the organisers didn't realise how much sound travels, and it's something that you just like don't even think about. And they were like, what, so those people that live all the way over there are going to hear that? And you're like, yeah, they're going to hear that. Like, so just from that, what have you found that has been maybe some of the most challenging events that you've done, and how you've kind of positively overcome that in terms of production? I
think the most challenging, and I'm all for it, the challenge is for people who haven't if you've not done outdoor events, I wholeheartedly encourage it. It's just that initial, you know, I think when you go there, it's going to sound really boring, but weather and water and all of and ground and unexpected people coming through. And I think the most challenging part of that probably has been when we go into a community and trying to, it was really gridiron show, and trying to explain what we do and why it's important. Actually, it was sort of to try and explain why we need to, I need to know all the footpaths that the public take. And I think, but I overcame that by just, I think 9 times out of 10, this is the same with venues, is actually knowing who the person to talk to is. And in that example was the local community coordinator who ran foraging expeditions, and I overcame that. I think that was a classic situation of, it's not what you know, but who you know in that situation. I think it's always worth the time trying to figure in those sort of situations, maybe more site specific, as maybe the more local, engaging with the local community and working alongside the local community, because everyone 9 times out of 10 will be there to help you and really want to help you. So yeah.
Thank you. And just a wee question. What is IP?
Oh, IP. Now, IP, I don't know. IP. I actually don't know what it stands for. I should know that. But IP rated just means that it's set to a standard that means it's able to be waterproof. So if you get you could get an IP rated light, which means you could put it can go outside, and you have different ratings. But if it's IP rated, at least the waterproofing's been thought about. So it's not like going and getting your bedside table lamp. That wouldn't be IP rated. So that's, yeah, it means that some sort of waterproofing has been thought about. Oh, there we go, ingress protection. Thanks, Martin.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks so much there. And I know that there's been a little bit of chat in the chat about as if anyone has found a waterproof jacket that actually works outside. So if you do have any recommendations for your exploring boots or your waterproof jackets, Claire has said Berghaus. And if not, a heated Chile. So if you do have any recommendations, Elle, that would be perfect.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Because of I go through, it's bad, but I end up going through them once a year just because of if I'm like they'll get torn or something. But I'll generally, what I do is I'll go to your outdoor shops and I purposely go through the labels, and they'll have shower proof, don't go near. You want to go, yeah, it's the water, it's the heavy waterproof, whatever they use adjective to look for on those on your boots and on your outdoor. It doesn't have to be I mean, it's all relative, but you don't have to spend hundreds of, it's just to look at your labels and looking at what they've been tested at is my recommendation.
Perfect, thank you so much. So if anybody, oh, Martin, sorry.
Just not on mute this time, but yeah, just to remember that there are lots of different types of weather. And while in Scotland we all have horror stories about gale force 9s and -15s, actually one of the most discombobulating weather we had was we were performing in Avignon, and it was so hot that if skin contacted the ground, you got blisters. So when the person had to lie down, we had to kind of madly have things set up so they could lie down. And when one of the girls lost her shoes, she ended up with a blister that size on her feet because the stone was so hot. So yeah, don't forget sunburn, sun cream, all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, it's just that you don't think about that on a nice sunny day.
Absolutely. And especially in Scotland, that you can be totally caught off guard with the weather sometimes, and it could be absolutely sweltering. But yeah, so we've got a few questions that are just for everyone, if we're happy to go ahead with that. The first question is, it sounds from Kevin like researching and absorbing other people's work is really important. Are there any outdoor art shows you've enjoyed that you've been able to watch digitally through this time? This is for everyone as well, just in case.
I've seen people do a lot more dance for camera or screen dance. I'm not too sure what the most current term is. I've seen a lot of that, and some of that has been outdoors, but whether it's been specifically made in that way, I doubt. So I suppose the easiest answer is no, I haven't actually. No, I haven't.
I've seen lots, but it's all been awful. And just because the kind of the magic of a performer interacting with people, then put onto a rubbish camera, then watched in your living room, you're kind of so far away from what was there in the first place. And in a way, the more engaging and the more interactive it becomes, the less exciting it is to watch on camera. So yeah, I don't think that's the way forward necessarily.
I think I have to agree, Martin, to be honest with you, because I think when you start using the medium of the camera, that's just like a whole other thing.
And I think you could enjoy something like, so some of those really big shows like, so Royal Deluxe or something, I think you could enjoy a film of that because it's so spectacular. But I think anything that is, like the Bumblebees would be awful on film because you kind of wouldn't be there to play and it would just seem a bit kind of juvenile somehow. Whereas in real life, it's wonderful. So yeah, I think be really careful about what the sort of lens through which you watch it.
Absolutely, and I think with the wheelie bins as well, it's just not really going to have the same effect, is it? So
if you're not there in real life to get squirted, it just looks all weird. We tried to
it's just wheelie bins just being filmed. So another question from Elle is, what do you think, this is for everyone, what do you think is the best duration for an outdoor piece? Better to have something longer that people could come in and out of, or a shorter or sharper piece?
It depends what you're doing.
I knew he was going to say that. I was like, Kevin's just going to go, you've got to make it suit your work. If it takes longer to do, then it takes longer to do. As a programmer, I'd be inclined to go with short, sharp stuff that is spread through the day. But if that doesn't suit your work, if your work is a 2-hour epic, then, and that's what it needs to be, then that's what it needs to be. And it goes back to what Kevin was saying about, if that's your piece, then you need to research who's programming that sort of work and find the place for it.
All I'd add was the colder it is, the shorter it should be. If you go to the continent, they will do what we would do in 45 minutes and they'll stretch it over 2 hours because it's nice and sunny and you can have a chat in between. Whereas if you're kind of wrapped up, ready for it, you kind of want everything to kind of hit with a certain pace and then you can get home. So yeah, winter shows should be shorter.
Perfect, that makes sense. Just before we finish up there, because that was one of our last questions, that if anybody does have questions, I said this in the last session that we did, when you go to bed at night and you're like, I should have asked that question, and it just comes to you at the totally wrong time. So if you ever experience any of that, and you do have any further questions for any of our speakers from tonight's session, please email Roz, and Roz will be able to pass that on to everybody who has spoke tonight. Just before we finish up there, does anybody else have anything that they would like to add, or anything, just one final top tip? Kevin, yep.
So Claire mentioned Outdoor UK Arts. That's a fantastic organisation. I'd also get people to check out Without Walls as well. I think they're also a fantastic organisation. And not only do they, I won't talk too much about it, but they're a network of festivals that share work. And they also commission work. They also provide research bursaries as well. So, I mean, for me, I mean, I've been lucky because they've commissioned 4 of my works, but I think they're brilliant as an organisation. They can really help you from the beginning of your idea to actually touring it. And what's great, it's not only just the festivals there, they also have like associated sister festivals. So it's just, if you get into that circuit and get commissioned by those guys, your show's probably going to have a pretty good life.
Thank you so much. And Roz has just put Outdoor UK Arts and Without Walls in the chat, and Martin has shared NASA as well, if I've said that right, because I'm just saying it like NASA, like the space program, but I know that it's not. So check them out as well. But thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight, and thank you so much to all our speakers for sharing all that really valuable experience and information. So this session has been recorded. Roz will get that captioned for us as best as it possibly can and popped on YouTube, so she'll be able to send out the link to you guys about that as well. Laurie has just said NASA and CVS, leave it to the US, because Laurie was actually asking what CVS meant earlier on, because they're from the UK, the US originally, and obviously CVS in the US is pharmacy. So there we go. But thank you so much again for joining us and asking all your questions and answering all the questions as well. And I hope you have a fantastic evening. I'll let you go and get your dinner now. But yeah, if you've got any further questions, just remember and email Roz, and I'm sure all of the lovely speakers will be able to answer as well. But thanks very much.